I am zooming in from Denver, and I work for Great Education Colorado. So our goal for the Great Education Colorado Advocates Network is to create a space for us to build community and take action together. We meet the second Tuesday of every month from 4:30 to 5:30 p.m. We will drop that May 9th link in the chat in just a little bit so you all can get a head start on registration for next month. As always, we have our community commitments, move up, move back. Obviously, we want everybody to speak, everybody to contribute, and because we want everybody to contribute, obviously, we can't take up too much space at one time. So if you have something to say it, and then please respectfully step back and allow others to say what they're going to say. No one knows everything, but together we know a lot. Let's learn together. We all come at this from different backgrounds. Some of us have been teachers, worked in business, worked in policy. We all have our experience as students. And the important thing to note is that we all bring something unique here. And that brings us into our last goal, which is presuming in positive intent, but acknowledging impact. We're all here to do the same thing, which is advance the cause of public education forward. Many of us have been advocates in the past, and some of us are just getting started on that journey. So if somebody says something that rubs you the wrong way, please do, because we are here to all learn the same thing and achieve the same goals. Presume positive intent, but if it does rub somebody the wrong way, if we've said something that offends, or perhaps even worse, let's acknowledge our impact and then move forward in our conversation. All right. As usual, we follow our listen, learn, lead format. Listen coming up first. And today we have a slightly different question. We've been asking questions about what we want in schools, what we need in schools. And a lot of those questions elicit answers about money or physical things like textbooks or desks, other supplies that we need in schools, the requisite technology that we need in schools to advance student learning and make sure that everybody is graduating prepared to lead their best life. But this one is a little less having to do with policy than those ones. So we just to give you a little primer, we have tweaked our mission and vision, and in our mission, we have put the idea of welcoming schools. And so we want to know before we go through that today is what a welcoming school means to you. It can be what that meant as a student. So what are the things that made you feel welcome? What was the atmosphere of your school like? How did people treat you? Or it can be as a teacher, if you have experience doing that, or it can be as a parent through your student. Any of those things are great, but we want to know, what does a welcoming school mean to you? So I'm going to go ahead and put everybody in breakout rooms real quick. We'll have about 10 minutes in breakout rooms, and then we will come back as usual and discuss in our larger group. So just give me 1 minute, and then we will be in breakout rooms. Welcome back, everyone. I hope we had good discussions in our breakout rooms. So as always, we are going to come back now and discuss and sort of share out from our groups and as individuals, if we just kind of want to go back and forth, what we said, what we learned. And so I will go ahead and pose the question, and then we can get off to our discussion. And so that question again was, what does a welcoming school mean to you? So I will open it for the next 10 minutes or so to discussion.
I'm happy to speak for our group, if that's okay with everybody in our group. I took notes what each person said, and I thought it was very interesting because it was a little different than I might have expected. The first was from the vantage point of a teacher, and having an administration that was welcoming and positive, not dictatorial, that they were able to be open with ideas. And so it was more between the teachers feeling welcome with the administration, and then also talking about schools making accommodations for parents that can't attend, like school conferences and things like that, reaching out. And the next one, which I would have expected, is no bullying and sexual harassment, no matter what your identity is. Another was the school building, walking in and seeing a building that's old and uncared for, whether that makes you feel unwelcome. And then the other was talking about principal, administration, and teachers being there in the morning and after school to greet kids as they come in and be a part of, every day. And and then National PTA talking about the family engagement seminars where they talked about teachers connecting with kids at home, even though we know that teachers don't have any time. Anyone from my group, if you want to add, if I missed anything.
You did great, Christy.
Great. How about others?
Autumn, I think you pretty much wrapped everything up. There were a couple of things that Paul added. So do you want to go ahead and?
Sure. So we all, one of the first thing that we really said was the welcoming environment. When you walk in and the students are engaged and learning, and there's a positive energy. And we also said, just the regular thing that you hear for welcoming, like inclusive to all students, whether, race, culture, identity, all of those things. And then we also said a culture of respect between the teachers and the students, and the students and the administration as well, and the teachers and the administration. And then I think the last thing we said was just students feeling safe and teachers feeling safe. And we weren't just talking about from exterior threats, we were talking about interior threats, teachers feeling safe from the administration and students, and then students feeling safe from bullying and threats from other students, as well as what you hear on the news, which is the exterior safety. And those were some of the things. We also kind of lastly talked about, when we grew up, it was a different time, and we have fond memories of how our schools felt welcome. And Diana was a teacher, and she has, recollections of things of what her schools were like. And so I think it's just, we have these feelings that we know sometimes they're hard to convey, but those were some of the things that we discussed.
Awesome. If a follow-up question, I guess, what is that, like a culture of respect, among students and teachers look like? I'm just thinking back to when I was in school and I was really disruptive. And I pissed off some teachers who kind of held that over me for the rest of the time that I took classes with them. And there was just this sort of back and forth between us that soured things permanently, or until I moved on to another class and never had them again. So what does that culture of respect look like?
A culture of respect. So what I'm not seeing, and what I would like to see at my son's school is it's sort of, to me, it goes, like we were saying, it does start at home, but there's not a lot that schools can do to control that other than the outreach stuff that we're talking about. But once the kids get to school, it's sort of modeled by top-down behavior. For example, if a student is shouting cuss words in the hall, and the teacher, and somebody says something to the teacher, and the teacher says, well, it's okay, they're just saying them in the hall, they're not saying them to anybody. Well, that's not really a culture of respect. We don't want our kids saying cuss words in the hall or to people, right? So some principals run it the other way, and they say, no, there will be zero tolerance for cussing. Cussing is just an example. It could be bullying or whatever. So you have to set that tone. And I found at my son's school, I don't know if it's fear of retaliation by teachers, especially since the behavior of, not teachers, parents, especially after the behavior of parents during COVID, that the kids are getting a lot of leeway. So they are getting told it's okay if you say it in the hall. Don't say it to a kid, or don't say it to a teacher. So we've got to, not we, but I mean, parents, teachers, admin have to sort of take the power back as the models. It's like Diana was saying, she can't control, when she was a teacher, she couldn't control very much how parents responded, but at school, she could model that behavior. So rather than giving kids permission, you're showing them the behavior that you want them to have, and it's going to, to help them. And in your situation, as far as if you did something to make your teachers mad, the first thing they should be doing is taking you aside one-on-one and finding out if there's something behind that. Like, why are you acting out? Is there trauma? Is there something going on at home? Those kind of things, right? That can create a relationship between you and the teacher to create that respect. If they just keep punishing you, they're not helping you correct that. They're just punishing you. So that's kind of what I meant, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you very much, Autumn.
Sure.
All right, let's hear from the other groups. We got 5 or 6 minutes left. Oh, come on. I know there were other discussions.
Go for it, Max.
I was accidentally unmuted, but sure, I'll speak. I don't know. We had a lot of different responses, and I think they were all really great. And unfortunately, I did not take rigorous notes like Christy, so I don't think I can list them all off. I know that my top 3 was safety, feeling like like people wanted me to be there, like my classmates and my teachers and the administration. And then meeting my educational needs so that I don't feel like no matter what I do, I'm like losing at school. I also think that something that was brought to my attention by that last conversation is like, yeah, respect between teachers and administration and student is a big one. I've never been on the, well, no, that's true. I've been on the teacher side, but I've never been on the administrative side. But I know, like, as a student, I felt very repressed, and I felt like because I was a kid, I was like, nothing I did was ever taken seriously. And so it created this like really hostile dynamic where like I was causing trouble, not because I had behavioral problems, because I was angry at these people. And I wanted them, unfortunately, my emotions weren't well regulated at that time. And so I truly wanted them to suffer. And so I think having like better relationships where your teachers and your administration on like a human level, and so they you have like sympathy for each other as like just human beings. I think that would go like a long way to facilitating that culture of respect, which is so fundamental to everyone feeling welcomed.
Thank you.
I
was just going to ask, I think it would be, if we have any other teachers on the call, former teachers, active teachers, I would love to know what your take on this question is. I can envision a student perspective pretty easily because I was one. But I know we've heard a little bit, but if there are any other teachers, administrators on the call, I would love to hear from you as well.
I'm a former teacher. I'm retired now. But back when I taught middle school with my students, I taught in a very small school. And so we knew the students coming up. But one of the things we chose not to do was to look at their file at the beginning of the school year, so we could have respect for where they were when they entered our own classroom. And we weren't influenced at all by what was in that folder, because kids react differently to different teachers. We do the same thing as human beings to different students, and it was a better start to the school year. And a lot of times, if you have a good start to a school year, it continues.
I really, really like that idea, Vanessa. Thank you for sharing. We have time for one or two more people for a quick share. We'll go to Beth.
As a teacher, my most favorite principal was one principal that wasn't in his office doing this paperwork and all that kind of stuff. He was a former athletic director. He was always in the halls. And every time he saw you, he was getting the kids to the classroom. As a teacher, he was saying, "Oh, we're so glad you're here. You're doing a great job." He hadn't been in my classroom, but he said that anyway, just because he had established that positive feeling. When we had our first all-school assembly, I was almost in tears as a teacher transferring into that school because you could hear a pin drop. There weren't any other kids talking. He had the respect of the classes, and he made you feel so proud to be at that school. So I do think a principal can make a lot of difference.
I really like that you hit on, he made you feel proud to be at that school, right? We should have sense, I'm convinced that we should have some sense of positive identity through our places of education. And so I think it's really cool that you mentioned that. So thank you.
I wanted to weigh in with kind of a little bit of a different lens, because I've not been a teacher in K through 12, but early in my career, I worked in the training division at Walt Disney World, and every single employee went through the program that my team delivered. So we're talking about in our peak year, 30,000 people, ranging from like first year in high school that they could work to retirees. And one of the things that we focused on when it came to respect is respect for you is what you think respect is. So we did a ton of multicultural training and education so that we could understand the cues that we were getting from other people. So a very specific example, so in Florida, a lot of people come from the Caribbean, and there was one particular Caribbean culture that, because I was in a position of authority, I came to realize that people would not make eye contact with me unless they were my equal or above. And so respect for me and them in that situation was me not harping on that and forcing them to make direct eye contact. It was relating to them in a way that was comfortable for them. And I feel like that actually comes up a lot for me when I think about it in Colorado, just because we are so not diverse in that way. So I don't know. I think it applies to K through 12 as well, because there were a lot of kids, freshman, sophomore in high school, going to those classes.
Great. Thank you very much, Liz. So at this point, we are going to move on to our learn portion of the night. But this is a great segue because in all of the emails that I sent to you over the past couple of weeks, the registration emails, we talked about how we have tweaked our mission and vision. And one of the ways in which we did is that we included the word welcoming, which is what we just talked about, right? So if we don't have the word welcoming, then we don't have exactly these conversations in relation to what we're doing, right? Or we're less likely to have them. But now it's a part of the fabric of our advocacy. And so I'm going to go ahead and we're going to go back to these slides. Our executive director, Lisa Weil, and I are going to guide you through these changes and then open it up for questions at the end. All right, I'm going to go ahead and read our new vision off, and then I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Lisa so that she can use all of her institutional knowledge from all the time she has been at Great Ed to talk to us about why we made these changes and what the future looks like. So our new vision is through public education, every Colorado student, regardless of their zip code, learning needs, language, identities, or the color of their skin, graduates to prepared to lead their best life. So, oops. So obviously, Lisa, can you just talk a little bit about what we added to the vision here and why, and then we will go ahead and make our way to our mission.
Absolutely. So that's very similar to what we used to say, that every student, no matter where they live, how they learn, the color of their skin, graduates prepared to lead their best life. The things that we changed to really reflect what was already embedded but not stated in our vision is through public education. Because a lot of folks who would privatize schools would say, oh, that's what we want too. We want every student to thrive. They just don't believe that public education as a community good is the way to do that. And so we wanted to highlight that. And we also wanted to add identities so that it was clear that we are looking at students from all the various lenses and all the ways they see themselves. And so we've just made that a little bit more inclusive. So the next slide is about the obstacles. And let me say why I'm talking about, or why we highlight the obstacles. And that's because really what we're working toward is a North Star. And I think a lot of people, that vision about every student thriving it's a thread through so many different organizations and all our communities believe that that's critical. That's the North Star. What's getting in the way of that? There are a few things, a lot of things are barriers to us getting to that North Star, but among the ones that are the most pernicious and the most lasting, the first one is one that we have been working on for all 20 years that Great Ed has been in existence, that continued chronic underfunding that is a result of all of the things in our Constitution, and especially Tabor. And so we are not getting to meet the needs of every student and all their identities and their learning needs, so long as we are so restricted in our funding. And you all have heard us talk about the statistics, and we don't have to go there, but we know that that is a huge barrier. Privatization, it's the notion that education is a commodity, and it has been creeping into conversations, and it is there are well-funded organizations throughout all our states that are it's in opposition to the mindset that our schools are community public goods, and that all of us, whether we have a child in our district or in our state schools or not, thank you, Vanessa, I can get back to that. It's that the that I'm sorry, all of us as individuals, all of us as taxpayers and citizens and members of our communities have an interest in what our schools are teaching, because they are a reflection of our values and what we want for the future. And so this idea that you privatize and it's just a commodity and you just give people money to go and buy their education wherever it makes sense takes away that real community spirit. And it takes money to all of the ideas of vouchers, et cetera, take money away from public education. And one of the best ways to get people to believe in privatizing is by starving schools. So that is a barrier that we have been pushing against and being anti-voucher, but that's something that we want to keep our eye on. And I think that those people who have been promoting privatization are also coming together with other folks who have been the last barrier of the attacks on marginalized students and curriculum that represents them. So these are the people who can think of as dictators, the ones who say, I don't want my child to read this, no child should read this. And you know that This is the case if you're watching what's happening in Florida, but you don't have to look in Florida. It's happening in Colorado. If any of you know about Woodland Park, it's a district in El Paso County where they adopted a set of standards that our state board specifically opposed. They adopted a completely different set of standards called birthright that has a very political bent, and they have been banning books. And my hometown of Greeley, there have been great disruptions at school board meetings because of the idea that there are certain books that should not appear on the shelves. So those are sort of the continuing obstacles. And if you can go, and we will have time for a Q&A, I promise, especially if I talk faster. So, or less, I think might be it. Can you go to the next slide, Ben? So, like I said, the fiscal policy reform at the ballot in the legislature, we have been there forever. We will always be there. Working toward a movement, bringing people together to change the narrative from that education is a commodity to education is what we all do together for our future. And lastly, centering the needs of marginalized students. We're building coalitions, pulling people together. There are so many people who are doing this work, but mostly they're doing it alone. And there are now starting to be, with the help of a number of people who are on this call right now, actually, people are coming together and learning from each other. We need to create those narratives, provide messaging and support and training so that we can together do what actually we know from polling is what the majority of people want, which is to have schools that are giving inclusive, comprehensive, truthful education to all of our students. That is really what the general public wants. They don't want book banning. They want to make sure that all children feel welcome. And the opponents of that are very well funded and well organized. And what we did when we looked at this broader, looking at the things that we've been doing, we've already been working on social studies standards. We've always been working toward equity and adequacy. And the reason that I keep saying that I'm so excited about this is because we finally have sort of the structure of what that means. We're building a movement toward our North Star. And to get there, we're going to be bringing people together so that locally and statewide, we can all be pushing back on the old narrative and bringing into being this idea. And so our new mission statement, if you can send it there, Great Education Colorado harnesses the power of grassroots activism and diverse, inclusive networks to guarantee that public schools in every Colorado community are welcoming and adequately, equitably, and sustainably funded. That's from the input that we got from many of you who took our surveys and were interviewed. Our board and our staff working together, we added that word welcoming. We say public schools, we say every community, and we always have that adequately, equitably, and sustainably funded. So that's the big picture. And I'm just going to give you some real quick insight into the strategic directions that we're implementing to get there. And as time goes on, we'll be talking to folks about all of these various components, and we want to help you find your way to plug in the way that is most meaningful to you. So if you can go to the next slide, Ben. The strategic directions that we landed on as a staff and board. Through a diverse and inclusive board and staff, we will grow and strengthen great ed. We're going to be here for the long haul because it's going to take a while to get to that North Star, and we're in it for the long haul. Through a diverse and inclusive network, Great Ed will build a dynamic and effective community of public education supporters. That's getting to building that movement. Through relatable and actionable information, Great Ed will empower and mobilize Coloradans. That's very much what we've done for all these years in providing simple ways to get engaged in the fight for adequate, equitable funding of schools. And through an engaged, diverse, and representative youth network, Great Ed will elevate youth voice. And that we feel is, it just kept bubbling up that if we want to create welcoming schools, we have got to include students in the conversation so that we are not imposing our view of what welcoming schools look like in a new generation at a new time. So I'm just going to quickly talk about what's coming next. I want to make sure there's time for conversation. We're starting to create a network of networks. The working title at the moment is Every Student Welcome Network. That brings together people, whether they're working in their community because there's an MLO and they're trying to get better funding for their teachers, or if they are wanting to make sure that the new social studies standards are being implemented in their schools, or if there's bullying happening and they're trying to engage there, if they are trying to promote equity at their school board level, or if they're trying to stop bad things like what's happening in Woodland Park and Douglas County and a number of others, and is being threatened elsewhere. Bringing together all those folks to understand that welcoming networks, we all have to work together locally and statewide to get through all those barriers I talked about. We can learn from each other, cross-pollinate, but instead of being in our own silos, really be able to work together. We are planning on an action summit in September. Many of you have been to our action summits in the past. The last one we held, I believe, was in 2018 before 73, and we were getting ready to do it again in 2020. And of course, COVID has meant we haven't for the last 3 years. So we are looking toward one in September in advance of what there may be ballot measures statewide, good or bad. There's the potential for both on budget. And there's also things that we can all do together that are not about endorsing candidates, but about empowering all of our networks and the constituents of those networks to ask school board candidates the right questions about creating welcoming, adequately, equitably supported schools. And so that summit we're just in the process of determining where it's going to be, and we'll be working on the programming. We'll have some national messaging we're really excited about, but we are in the process of figuring that out, and we'll need some help and support. And then the last thing is our public education voter campaign that we know, and there are other things that are going to come up as organically. Obviously, we're still involved at the legislature. But that public education voter will be where we give people the information that they need on voting on the statewide ballot measures if they exist, but also how to be a really engaged voter in school board elections. Because I will tell you that the other side, who are promoting the dictator view, we know that they are getting people ready. They are recruiting. They are aiming at school boards across the state, either to take them over or just to make life miserable for the majority. And I know there are a lot of stories from around the state where that's happening. So we are never going to endorse candidates. Great Education Colorado is a C3. We don't do that, but we absolutely can use this opportunity to explain the need for welcoming schools and what that means, and how to think about being a public education voter in your community and how you can help others do that as well. So that's, I think, the end of it. And we're at Q&A now about where we're at, and would love to hear what you have to think. You guys literally are the first group to hear this from outside our, internally. And so we did want it to roll it out to you all first to get your thoughts and suggestions as we tell the world about this pivot that we're doing, this sharpening of our focus in our work.
Great. Thank you very much, Lisa. And we'll go ahead and just let's see. It looks like we have some questions in the chat.
Okay,
But it looks like it
I wasn't looking.
may have been kind of back and forth. Let's see. Liz, the budget stabilization factor is the BS factor.
Which they named so that we could call it the BS factor.
Yeah, aptly named. All right. So yeah, go ahead. If you have questions, thank you.
Comments, suggestions.
Comments, questions, comments. ways that you see yourself getting involved in the future. We're going to have, I have a volunteer survey ready to go for the Action Summit, Public Education Voter, and then also the network of networks that Lisa was talking about. And over the coming weeks, I think we're going to have a much clearer view of what those volunteer opportunities are going to look like. But if anyone has any questions, comments, concerns, weird jokes, please feel free to say them.
Hi, my name is Amy Golden, and I run an organization called Denver Moms for Social Justice. And one of the things that I am deeply concerned about is the way that our Board of Education currently here in Denver is under attack. Because I believe from all the reading that I've done over the last few weeks, that parents are so motivated by anger and fear that right now their lens is very clouded, and there is a very disturbing tone of racism in the groups that I'm observing about the way that things are being operated and how they are being deployed. And so I'm curious, because your group is a non-for-profit, how do you language yourself around that to bring in parents like myself? Because what I'm noticing is that groups that are recently organized, my group has about 600 parents in it, but the groups that are more recently organized, even in the last 3 weeks, that are zeroed in on public education safety are very vocal, they're very funded, they're very scary because they are terrified. And so I'm curious on how you're going to call in parents like myself. Like, how are you I found you, but how do you find me? Like, how do you reach out to parents like myself?
That is a fabulous question, and I'm so glad that you did find us. And that is one of the things that we'll be asking folks to do, is help us find each other. There are a couple people on this call here, Liz Wilson and Amber Leopold, who have been working in this space for a while, and we're going to be partnering with them. They've been starting to find those people in various communities. But I think one of the things that, and would love all of your thoughts about this, how we get our message out, that we are talking about that North Star. And even though we're going to be pushing against a lot of these barriers and some of the racism that you're talking about, we are still, it's toward a very positive outcome. And what we hope to be able to do is bring in, as I said, there's a national organization that's been doing polling and focus groups and messaging on this, to make it possible to engage in ways with people who have differing views that open up the conversation, are not nearly so polemic, and can get into people's different frame of mind of thinking about how do you address that racism? How do we deal with the nuance? And that's, I think, the kind of thing that we need to deal with. If you look at what happened, my sons were East High School grads, that people all immediately wanted to pull it into it's SRO versus no SRO. And that is so, it's mistaking symptoms and causes and effects, and it's so not nuanced. And so hopefully, as we're doing this, this is not like for November. There will be impact in November. This is for the long haul. This is to start having those conversations and figuring out how to bring more people in to talk within the frame of how do we make our schools what we want them to be. And I'm going to stop there because there are probably others who could really jump in here.
Thank you. Yeah, I apologize for going off camera for a minute. There's a maintenance person changing a light bulb in my apartment, so I may be off again in just a second, but I'll be on long enough to just ask, are there other questions or comments regarding these changes to the mission and vision statement or our future work?
Hi, folks. My name's Cody, pronouns he, him, here in Denver, formerly grade ed staff, really excited to be back in this space. One thing I hear from Amy's comment and question, excuse me, more than a comment, a question, and with the new direction of this network of networks idea, I think it's really exciting to see the potential of what that is going to mean for this connection building that needs to take place. I live and work in Denver, where we have a very dense landscape of organizations and groups that are moving in this space. And so I think like for me and where I'm sitting in the work is like that opportunity to have a formal structure to bring folks together to do that, because I think folks are really wanting that opportunity to convene in their communities and make those discoveries and do so somewhat on their own turf. And so providing that space for folks to be able to find that values alignment and for Great Ed to continue to be a convener in the landscape, I think is really exciting to see what that could look like on top of the school funding work.
Thanks, Cody. And it's wonderful to have you back. It's kind of like you know, when somebody leaves Saturday Night Live and they come back and they, well, cameo. And we're
The
happy to
Hotel
have
California,
you back.
whatever.
Yeah, the Hotel California. But I'll leave it there because I know Ben. I want to make sure we get that link in.
Yeah, and with the link, as always, like we historically have problems with these, even when the settings are entirely correct for what Google wants us to do. So if you are having trouble accessing this thing for now, it'll give you I don't think you will. I think everything will be good. But if you do have trouble accessing it, just send a request for access and I will grant all of them very quickly. And I will make sure to get it either transferred to another document that's on another account if it's something wrong with our Google account specifically, or we'll figure it out in the next day or so. But I think it should work all right. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in the chat. I will also reach out to all of you who are on this call. I have the whole sign up list via Zoom and follow up with that link as well. So if anybody has any other questions, go ahead and fire away. Otherwise, that is the end of our formal agenda. And I am excited for everybody here to plug in and start figuring things out with us.
Amy, I'm happy to see that Liz and Autumn are already connecting with you. That's exactly what we're hoping for. One other thing I did want to say is that this is the Every Student Welcome Network. It is not the Every Student Welcome Coalition. We are not going to try to bring everybody together in a room or even a Zoom room at any time to make a decision that this is what we're going to do on a certain policy, or that's there will be time for coalitions and there will be time for that. What this really is creating the movement, connecting everybody who is in sync on this movement together. And giving people opportunities to learn, to get training, to get messaging, to get help from somebody who's been where they are before. The other side has this, and it's time for us to have it, and we're co-creating it as we go along. The things that are in that form that Ben just showed you is you can help us figure out the summit. We're going to need a lot of hands on deck and a lot of ideas to come together on that. You can help us, say that you want to be part of the network of networks and help us find different organizations in your own community. There's all kinds of new ways. We're figuring it out, but we've got a tremendous strategic plan and a real commitment to implementing it. So it really is an exciting time.
Great. And also, just so you know, volunteer opportunities, since all this stuff sort of is in its early stages. These volunteer opportunities we will probably change over the coming months, and we may have more. But this is just to sort of give you an idea of what we think we need now, based on what we have needed for events like this in the past. And so that we can start contacting you really early. You are great. Thank you. All right. Yeah, we'll stick on for a few minutes. And if anybody wants to chit chat, but Delaney, you can go ahead and stop the recording, please.